Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, may I have your attention, please? Are you ready to engage in a mind-blowing experience and hear talks about life, technology, entertainment, and business? The next episode of Hipther Talks starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Hi everyone, Zoltan here. We're back again this week at Hipther Talks. Today we are diving into Fintech again, which is one of our favorite topics besides the blockchain and the gaming industry. So I have here today Lev Bass, Chief Business Development Officer and co-founder of Huntli. Hi Lev, nice to have you here.
Hey Zoltan, it's a pleasure to be here. It's nice to see you as always.
Yeah, we met Lev at our conference in Riga in May last month. So just to give a short introduction so the audience know who Lev is. Lev, the best thing is to say it in your own words. Say a few words about yourself and your company.
Yeah, so I'm a co-founder of Huntli. Huntli is a live transaction monitoring fraud prevention tool that is frequently used by banks, by financial service providers, by gambling and betting industry and crypto to fight both fraud and comply with international AML CFT regulations.
All right. So I know your bio. I read it, and I just want to ask you if you can share a bit about your background and how you came to specialize in fraud prevention and regulatory compliance, and particularly in the sectors like banks, PSPs, fintechs, and online gambling.
Yeah. So I worked in compliance for quite a while, and but my focus came around like fraud and fraud prevention and everything in relation to that very intensely during COVID, where the actual amount of fraud cases that were both reported and noticed quadrupled over half, like first half a year of COVID, where everybody was in the lockdown, and it became worse, like half on half throughout the COVID. And this is where sort of also my friends and family members became victims of those fraud cases, and became apparent that something needs to be done, that there is whatever is currently is offered by the industry is not enough. So sort of I understood that it's something that needs to be addressed, and this is something that we're doing quite actively right now.
Yeah, it's crazy how the amount of cybersecurity threats have increased during the pandemic, and yeah, we had been talking to many experts who are experts in cybersecurity, and yeah, most of them were saying that it's because of the people that moved to their home and started using their Wi-Fi, which was not secure, and logging into the servers and stuff like that. Yeah.
So in regards to this is actually a very interesting thing. The industry that did, like when the COVID lockdown happened and we couldn't go like anywhere at all, the industry that digitalized the fastest was actually fraud. So whoever hustled on the street at that time could no longer be there, and there is like no tourists to scam in larger cities. People just like they digitalized, they moved their schemes and frauds and stealing online, which is like sad and hilarious at both times.
All right. So from your perspective, what are some of the most pressing fraud-related challenges these banks and PSPs, fintech companies are facing?
I mean, the fraud is ever evolving, and there are new schemes used and discovered almost every month. So the main challenge for those larger organizations who have like their internal policies and guidelines and approaches that when they need amendment, it kind of takes a long way to adopt. So an ability for any financial institution or fintech or even gambling and betting industry to quickly adopt to fraud is currently the main challenge. So the systems that are offered right now to deal with those, and again, guidelines and regulations that are in place, they are not flexible at all.
All right. So could you maybe shed light on the specific tools or tactics you utilize in your work to tackle fraud and also ensure compliance?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's important for me to be careful here, not to,
of course,
come in cahoots with any of our competition or partners in this regard. But the general approach would be for a financial service provider to have 4 or 5 different systems that tackle separate issues around fraud prevention, IML, CFT compliance, responsible gambling, if we're talking about gambling and betting industry, as well as, for example, compliance with newly introduced MiCA regulation by European Union. So there would be a multitude of systems that are being used, and those systems, well, they rarely work well together, and they are usually fixed around like certain departments. Those departments' communication, interdepartment communications is lacking already, but department to department, like they rarely communicate with one another. So the information sharing is definitely scarce, and this actually could be solved quite easily with a system that would unify and allow certain level of orchestration of those separate systems.
Yeah.
So, but then all the departments that are involved in fraud prevention, IML, safety, compliance, and whatnot should also be allowed to work together, intermingle, so there should be no competition in this sense, while there is right now.
All right. So yeah, I was always thinking how why is that these guys who hatch up these fraud schemes are always so creative. So basically, if they apply the same energy to their legitimate job, they most probably become a CEO or something. Like what they are saying, I could be successful, but where's the fun in that? So I must pretend to be a Nigerian prince or something.
I mean, it's mostly around the current hustle culture that is in place, that is highly promoted by all those influencers who rarely work legitimately in their lives, and they promote this hustle culture. Well, you need to get rich very fast, as quick as possible. Nobody really understands that there are consequences to that kind of behavior, and those consequences catch up with almost everybody who do that.
All right. So you are also touching base on responsible gaming practices, and want to check if how does the adoption of responsible gaming practices relate to your work and fraud prevention, and maybe can you give some specific examples about it?
Sure. So responsible gambling is not as much connected to fraud as, for example, IML violations. However, there are still fraud that are happening around. So the main threat comes from people who are unfortunate enough to fall addicted to gambling, and this is like very important to the industry to sort of help those people. However, sometimes it's hard for them to help themselves, meaning that they would, for example, ask their friends and family members to register for them, and they would use profiles on their behalf. So that would constitute to some sort of identity fraud, and could actually bring people who utilize those schemes into even bigger problems that they are right now, when they sort of cannot abstain from gambling and betting. yeah, this is more like interpersonal issue. People who are not able to seek help. We, like as a tech provider, have solutions to sort of identify those people, but it's on gambling industry's shoulders to approach to those people with like more respect, I believe.
Yeah, and yeah, either way, the as we talked about earlier, with the digitalization and people moving their activities online, the online gambling industry has also been doing substantial changes when it means to increase digitalization and regulation. And how do these changes impact your work in compliance and fraud detection?
Mm. So with like more and more companies going online in gambling and betting industry as well, um, and even people preferring like online, if we're talking about online gambling specifically, is people are preferring to do it online using their mobile devices and whatnot.
Yeah.
It actually brings more people and more need to monitor their activity. So at some point, it becomes harder and harder to do it with existing resources. So new technology needs to be developed that brings new capabilities to compliance departments, to investigation departments, to risk departments who work with the end user data semi-automatically right now. So more automation is needed for that system. That obviously creates huge opportunities for us, and I think with benefits that we already brought to the industry, kind of proves my point.
All right. So can you also share how transaction monitoring tools such as your company can aid and help in both fraud prevention and promoting responsible gaming practices?
I mean, sure. So for us, in gaming industry specifically, we like to see it not only as transaction monitoring per se, more like event monitoring and behavior analytics, because the system that we build is like so flexible at this point that we can monitor specific button presses, filling in of certain fields, participation in certain games, uh, amounts of time spent there, how much money people spend on certain games, how much they win, how much they lose. And we can automate acquiring of that information, processing of that information. And then whenever, for example, certain individual is playing too much, we can show them relative alerts that, hey, like maybe it's time for you to like maybe chill out a bit, go get some water, and return later. So
Exactly.
something along those lines.
All right. So yeah, as we talked earlier about ever evolving fraudulent tactics. So how do you stay ahead of these evolving fraudulent tactics and ensure that your strategies still remain effective?
Yeah, so most of our inspiration we get from our clients, meaning that we work with them directly. We have an open direct communication channel with them. It's not in any way in ticket format. There is always a support manager that is connected to a certain client. Me, myself, like Mitchell or Sergey could participate ourselves as well because we're very curious at this point in time to sort of look at those schemes and how they could be battled. So we communicate with clients directly. We figure out the way that we can address those issues directly with the client. And the flexibility of the system right now is quite impressive. So we can adopt to those new schemes that are happening right away the same day that we notice them.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And yeah, as the trend goes with the hustle generation, so does the expansion of companies, because everybody wants to have a global reach nowadays. And as the online gaming platforms do, so do the fintechs. They also have an increasing time to go global. So how do you manage the complexity of complying with different regulatory landscape? Because that's It's something very hard to do, I think.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and also a pretty common misconception to some extent. Most of our regulations are built upon, well, first and foremost, common sense. But second of all, there is international organizations that recommend certain actions, like, for example, FATF, or for European Union, that would be like Centralized European Commission. And but for each individual country or for each individual regions, those approaches are not so distant from the common sense and from the recommendations provided by those organizations. So if we are able to create a process that complies with overall common sense, then once it's being applied to a specific region or a specific country, it's just a matter of tweaking like certain or fine-tuning certain like smaller issues than like dealing with the system as a whole.
All right. So next up is digital transformation, which is something that's trending all around Europe. I don't know how your country is doing, but my country is doing nothing about it. They're just saying that they are doing so. How do you see the future of fraud detection and regulatory compliance in these industries, especially in the light of the ongoing developments in technology and the digital transformation that I mentioned?
So in terms of like individual countries, I believe it's our goal as entrepreneurs and business owners to provide like valuable insight of how like certain issues could be addressed. People, as far as our experience with working with regulator goes, they're very attentive and they would be very appreciative towards accepting recommendations and best case practices when they're being shared. I saw like a lot of companies battling with regulator when regulator tries to introduce new requirements or new features. It's not really the right approach, I believe. So it could land you in hot water, and it's always nice to be like friends with those regulators and provide valuable insight, and then actually battle with them. But to the second part of your question, for us, like anything that sort of changes is good because we're happy with the adaptability and flexibility of our approaches that we promote to our clients. So, yeah.
All right. So, AI. We must touch base on AI.
Of course.
There's no talk if we're not talking about AI. So what role do you see AI or machine learning playing in the enhancement of fraud detection and prevention, especially in these sectors?
So in light of recently published European Union's AI Act, it's really a bit early to comment on it, but some critical issues already popped up there. Is specifically that you cannot refuse person a service based on their score that they receive using the AI technology. So AI could not do, the China thing.
Yeah,
exactly. It's commonly referred to. So we cannot do like social scoring using AI, and this is actually a good thing because whenever talks of AI pop up, it always feels like it's a black box that nobody really controls, and there is little to no accountability. And we, as a company, are really supporting this. Measures introduced by European Union to bring more responsibility and more accountability towards AI technology. And it's important not to sort of make it into like the social scoring system where people who behave badly, gamble badly, are labeled as fraudsters whenever like it's not a proven thing. And we are indeed are supporting like free market and free access to the market. There are other different ways to battle fraud. So we would rather focus on those than jumping like blindly would jump on this AI ML wagon.
All right.
We are sort of we ourselves are working closely with AI, like leaders in AI and ML in this sphere as well as in fintech sphere, to figure out the way how to properly adopt AI technology into fraud prevention. But with new regulations that just came in, we need to be careful again, not to make it a China thing.
Exactly. So, case study. Maybe could you share some case where your intervention has made a significant impact on a company's fraud prevention measures or regulatory compliance problems?
Sure. So I must be very careful here not to
of course
indicate like specific clients. So I try to be as vague as possible. I apologize for that in advance. But generally, so we saw this like one specific, the case that I can talk about is with one specific client that they just launched their operations. They were very optimistic in terms of their growth strategies. And what started happening after they just have launched is that they actually started growing beyond their wildest expectations. So they were onboarding like thousands of users a week. They were very happy. But then they note like our system started flagging those users as bots based on their specific behavior. Like for example, as you and me, as we know, it's very common for a user to fill in all the fields in 20 milliseconds, like exactly 20 milliseconds. So yeah, our client came to us with like shock, like why our system is blocking so many users. And this is where we showed like specific part of our system that tracks all that activity and highlights it as fraudulent. And as this thing was developed, those users were able to deposit a lot of money. And because our system started blocking them, they wouldn't be able to withdraw that money from the system. So essentially, we stopped about 1.5 million euros of illicitly gained funds accumulated by bots in the system.
Nice.
Right away in like just span of a few days that the scheme was happening. So at some point, fraudsters that attacked this particular client, they like understood that and they like stopped engaging immediately. So, and the client saw the real picture afterwards.
Oh, crazy. So as a closing question, I would like to ask for your advice that you would give to companies in these sectors on how to keep their systems secure and comply with the ever-evolving regulations.
Yeah, hashtag not illegal advice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, it's very nice to be open to new technologies that are coming in. It's in regards to like fraud and technological development, it's always an uphill ongoing battle between who can outsmart who and who can deliver better solutions in the end of the day. But the main advice that I would give is just to be open to new technologies and what they can bring to the table. Be like mentally flexible to adopt new approaches as well, because in the end of the day, the goal here is to make clients, I mean the end users, happy and yet stopping fraudsters dead in their tracks from accessing systems, abusing clients as well, because they also fall victims to that too. And just be open and be mentally flexible, and always keep searching for those new approaches that are popping up almost each and every month.
All right. I also have to warn people about the fact that there's a scheme going on social media where they're advertising Google Bard AI.
Oh no!
Where you can, where you need to sign up and pay like 50 euros per month to use it. It's not the
Seriously?
actual thing. Yeah, exactly. I just saw it yesterday. It's crazy, and it has a lot of engagement on it. So, all
Yeah.
right.
So with those, that's very interesting, because a lot of what we see as well is around, like, the weakest link in any fraud scheme is always the individual who falls victim to it. It could be inside an organization, or it could be just the end user of a platform. So there are some like common sense that could be applied when engaging with any fraudulent activity online. Is like, one of the most frequent one is that you don't press links that look suspicious.
Yeah.
So anything that doesn't look like affiliated with Google and just have some rubbish nonsense in the middle is definitely a no-go.
Yeah, it's actually a URL which includes Google, AI, Bard, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's even the logo and everything. So, Lev, thank you so much for your time. It has been great. If you like to say some parting words to the audience, you are my guest.
No, I think I said like quite enough today. Thank you very much.
All right. And thank you for our listeners for tuning in, and make sure to subscribe to get notified for the next one. So thank you.
Thank you for joining. Be sure to check back next week for the next Hipther Talks, and subscribe on Amazon Music, Overcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, and Pandora.